All right, now that we've got the introduction and quick starter guides out of the way, let's dive right in to the meat of the course. And we're going to kick things off with the Sokolsky slash Polish opening. And I remember my first encounter with seeing the opening played at a master level. And I've always found when studying openings that if you can make associations with certain players, or you may face that player at some point in tournament play. I mean, I often pace the room in tournaments, seeing what everybody's playing and kind of keep mental notes of that. A national master from South Carolina, Klaus Pohl, he had a game where he played the Polish against a player a solid 200 points rated higher than him, and came away with a win in an open tournament in Atlanta. And Klaus was the first master that I played against in tournament play in 2004 in the Atlanta Chess Center, and it just made an impression. Since then, Klaus has passed away, but I still carry the memories of initially preparing for this opening, hoping that I would get black against him and he would play it against me. This, of course, wasn't his main line that he played all the time. He was a well-rounded player, but he did like to have fun every now and then and get off the beaten path and play these types of lines. So, respect to Klaus Pohl, and without further ado, let's get into this. And the first move that I'm going to recommend for you to play against b4 is c6. And this gets away from the traditional structure e5 or d5, and c6 is going to be less covered in 1b4 theory and in the 1b4 text, if you will. So we're starting with our theme that we talked about in the introduction of surprising, getting that surprise value in versus our opponent who is trying to get us off the beaten path with their move in the first place. And c6 is starting by taking control of that b5 square. And often, white wants to play b5 himself. Step one is taking that away. And we're going to see a few different moves by white here. And the first one we're going to take a look at is e4. And honestly, I have never faced this move in practice. E3 or bishop b2 is what I face most often. So keep that in mind when studying, that this is the first few lines are going to be, you need a general idea of how to handle this position. When we get to the later lines, I'll make sure to note for you, those are the ones you need to train more often. All right, so e5. Go ahead and make sure we're getting our slice of the center. And after a3, easy to understand, he needed to defend the pawn. And already with the b4 and a3 moves, white is already starting to have to play defense, and we're on move 2. Knight f6, putting pressure on the e-pawn. And now d4, lots of pawn moves by white, but he's trying to strike back, and there's really no other move in the position that is going to place pressure on black, who can develop normally. It's always fun when you start recording and you get tongue-tied a little bit, but we leave this stuff in for you to show that we're natural, normal human beings as well. Knight takes e4 because we're in for this. Takes d5, and much like in many king-pawn systems, the knight needs support on that e4 square by d5. And after knight d2, bishop f5, grab. And I like this capture as it keeps tension in the position and kind of restrains white from moving that bishop on f1 in the meantime. Knight f3, knight d7, and on bishop b2, this is a good moment to put the question to white's position. We could play a simple move like bishop e7, but we're not getting the most out of our development. The ideal square in the structure for our f8 bishop is c5. So I want to make this happen, and I'm going to play a5 first and foremost to chip away. So we're in good shape here if white says, oh, okay, I don't want to touch my b pawn. Well, he's just made this bishop into a pawn with a funny hat, and I don't expect this move to occur. So we're either going to see captures on a5, which just accelerates our development after queen takes a5 check, or b5. And this frees up that square for our piece. And after bishop e2, castles, castles, rook e8. And overall, from start to finish in this line, we saw very quickly from the point when we played e5, we're putting some pressure on b4, and we're taking the initiative all the way to the end position where we're getting some good pressure on this pawn, where we're looking to potentially capture on f3 and undermine the structure. On to our next line. So we are in it in the second variation, and we're seeing our key move c6 again. And by now, e4, we understand, is met by e5, getting back to this d4 plan immediately if white doesn't take the time to protect the b4 pawn. And I like the idea, instead of capturing on b4, where it kind of works out like a wing gambit seen in the French or Sicilian defense. Bishop takes b4 is going to be met by c3, and then we find ourselves moving the bishop again, and for a pawn, white's got a strong center and some play. I much prefer to play knight f6 here, because we're giving white the opportunity to simply play a3 and transpose back into the variation we just looked at. Otherwise, d takes e5, we're going to see similar themes again. Queen d4, we need support of that knight. d5. And be on the lookout for, if they play moves like f3, we have the nasty follow-up of queen h4 check. So e takes d6, again, protect the knight. And bishop e7. And already there's the subtle threat here. If queen takes g7, bishop f6 gets the job done with defending our rook, as well as giving that bothersome question to the queen and the rook on a1. So after bishop e7, bishop b2, don't be in too much of a hurry to castle here and self-mate. Bishop f6, key move, and bishop e6. Black is completely flexible here with just no issues, and I'd much prefer to play bishop e6 as opposed to queen e7, because I am trying to win. Now, knight d4 and knight f5, because the pin is far too strong for white to deal with. So keep that in mind. Bishop takes f6, queen takes f6. Again, keeping that eye on the a1 rook, a theme seen all throughout this variation. Castles, and bishop takes a2, with the delicious threat of rook e8, where we will be giving that pin, because the interesting placement of the knight on d6 is covering the e8 square. So the a2 pawn was free for the taking from this threat. Bishop e2 and bishop d5. Best square for the bishop in this case, as we've gotten our pawn, we're okay getting rid of this bishop at this point, and this isn't really going to help white liquidate the pressure due to the pieces on the e file. He's going to be losing some time. Knight c6 and rook fe8, where white has a problem holding on to everything here, and the bishop on e2 has some issues. All right, back to it. And we're going to take a look at another d4 line here. Knight f6 again, offering that transposition. We're seeing the same sort of themes. Knight e4, support your knight. Bishop e7 protects the g7 pawn tactically, as well as keeping that bishop f6 idea in mind. Blocking with the bishop, not the queen. And we're seeing knight c3, trying to protect that rook on a1. Bishop takes a2, again with that threat of rook e8. And now we're finally getting to the deviation here. Instead of knight takes d5 like we saw in the previous line, castles. And we're going to gain time. White starts a forcing combination, but we have absolutely nothing to worry about. Queen takes d4 is a reasonable alternative to the main game, but I prefer knight e4, where after takes, we're headed straight for an imbalanced ending with bishop takes f3. And this is one of the themes that often pops up in my text, where I'm looking to create favorable imbalances and point from opening to middle game to end game. They say that tactics flow from a superior position. Somebody very good said that at one point. So how do we get that superior position? By good preparation from the opening, and the opening should flow into the middle game. Middle game should flow into end game. And at this point, we see a knight versus bishop ending. b5 and a5. And black's got some pull here. We've got ideas to get our knight into the game. And overall, black's chances are better here.